Ever get that feeling like you're in a room and everybody agrees on something, but you're just not feeling it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like maybe everyone's raving about a new restaurant.
Yeah.
But you try it and you're like, it's just okay.
Happens all the time.
That, my friend, is herd mentality. And that's what we're diving into today.
That's right.
We've got some really cool research lined up looking at like the psychology behind why we follow the crowd. And even more importantly, how we can resist that pull when like our gut's telling us to go a different way.
It's a deep dive into conformity and
Okay.
more nuanced than just following trends.
I like it.
Yeah. We'll uncover some pretty surprising facts like how even a small group of dissenters can totally change the direction of a crowd.
That's what I'm excited about. You know, we all know about things like peer pressure.
Right.
But to think that there's actual science behind why we're so susceptible to it,
Yeah.
that's super intriguing. So where do we even begin unpacking this?
Well, let's start with the brain's reward system. So when we conform, our brains release oxytocin.
Okay.
Gives you that sense of belonging,
Hmm.
you know, that warm, fuzzy feeling of being part of the group.
Right.
And like any reward,
Yeah.
our brains naturally seek more of it.
Makes sense.
Can be a good thing evolutionarily,
Oh.
you know, strength in numbers.
Yeah.
But it also makes us vulnerable to groupthink and, you know, potentially bad decisions.
So it's not just peer pressure then?
Nope.
There's a biological reason why we follow the crowd? This bliss response, is that what you called it?
Yeah.
Is it really strong enough to override our own judgment?
Absolutely. Think about those classic Ash conformity experiments.
Okay.
Participants see lines of different lengths.
Okay.
They're asked to match them.
Gotcha.
When others in the group intentionally picked the wrong answer, a surprising number of the participants conformed,
Really?
even though they knew it was wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, the desire to fit in, to avoid sticking out, could be really powerful.
Okay, that's a little unsettling. So even when we know something's wrong, we might still go along with the group.
It happens.
Just to avoid feeling like the odd one out, this isn't just about like following trends.
Right.
It's potentially about ignoring facts and logic.
Exactly. And that tendency to conform has real-world implications.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah. That's
especially in places like financial markets. Take the dot-com bubble, for example.
Oh,
Investors saw others making tons of money and jumped on the bandwagon, even though a lot of those companies didn't have any real value.
Yeah.
You mentioned FOMO, fear of missing out.
Right.
That can drive some crazy behavior on a massive scale.
And I bet that fear is amplified even more by social media.
Oh, for sure.
It's like this constant highlight reel
Right.
of everyone else's successes.
Exactly.
Making it even harder to resist that urge to follow the crowd. Even when it comes to risky financial decisions, this is going way beyond harmless trends now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Social media platforms are designed for engagement,
Okay.
which often means amplifying content that, you know, triggers emotional responses, including FOMO. And because algorithms personalize our feeds,
Yeah.
we're always exposed to information that reinforces our existing biases, creating echo chambers. Dissenting voices are rarely heard.
So we're primed by our biology to seek belonging, and then we're bombarded with curated content that just fuels this fear of missing out.
It's a recipe for herd mentality.
It is. It's like the perfect storm, especially when it comes to investing.
Yeah.
But social media is just one example, right? Where else do we see this play out in a big way?
Well, think about political movements, especially in the age of social media.
Right.
A single tweet or hashtag can go viral and shape public opinion. You know, mobilize huge groups of people.
Yeah.
We saw this with the Arab Spring uprisings,
Right.
where social media was really important in organizing protests and spreading information.
That's interesting, because in those cases, the herd mentality driven by social media actually led to positive change.
That's right.
It wasn't just blindly following the crowd. It was about coming together for something bigger than themselves.
It's exactly.
Just that herd mentality isn't inherently good or bad.
Okay.
It's a tool that can be used for different purposes.
Right.
The important thing is to understand how it works and, you know, learn when following the crowd is beneficial and when it's not.
So it's not about becoming a lone wolf, totally rejecting any influence from the group.
Right.
It's about knowing when that influence is leading us astray.
Yeah.
And being able to make our own choices, even when it's hard.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between belonging and individuality.
I like that. So how do we start to develop that awareness? Are we all just destined to be swept up in the current of popular opinion?
Not at all. There are definitely strategies we can use.
Okay, good.
And that's what we'll get into next.
Awesome.
But first, let's take a closer look at how herd mentality shows up in our everyday lives,
Okay.
beyond the big, obvious examples like social media and finance.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So we know herd mentality is this powerful force driven by like biology and amplified by things like social media. But how does it actually show up in everyday life? Beyond the big obvious things. I'm talking like choosing a restaurant or what to wear.
Oh, absolutely. Herd mentality can influence even like the tiniest decisions.
Really?
Think about it. You're scrolling through restaurant reviews.
Uh-huh.
You find a place with like hundreds of 5-star ratings.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you more likely to try it even if a friend told you it was just okay?
Yeah, probably. I mean, those glowing reviews make it seem like everybody loves it.
Right.
Who wants to be the one person who doesn't? It's that FOMO again, right?
Exactly. That's how it works. We're constantly bombarded with information about, what other people are doing.
Yeah.
What they're buying, what they're thinking.
It's true.
And that shapes how we see what's normal, what's desirable, what's acceptable.
So how do we break free from that? How do we start making choices based on what we like, not what everybody else is doing?
It starts with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to when you feel that pull to conform, even if it feels wrong. For example, maybe you're at a work meeting and everyone seemed to agree on a plan.
Okay.
But something about it just doesn't sit right with you.
Oh, I've been there. It's like that feeling of everybody else gets it, so maybe I'm the one missing something.
All right.
And then you just kind of nod along even though you have doubts.
That's herd mentality at work.
Yeah.
In those moments, it's so important to just pause.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, do I actually believe this?
Yeah.
Or am I just going with the flow?
Right.
It can be tough to speak up to disagree,
They can be.
but it's so important for building up that independent thinking.
So getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, with potentially being the only one who disagrees.
Okay.
It's about having the courage to trust your gut,
Right.
even when it goes against what everyone else is saying.
Yeah.
You don't always have to be the loudest voice in the room either.
Oh, good.
Sometimes just asking a question or, expressing a little hesitation
Yeah.
can change things up and encourage people to think more critically.
That makes sense. So it's not about like a full-on rebellion.
Right.
It's more about making space for different opinions
Exactly.
for a more thoughtful approach.
Mm.
But what about when speaking up feels too risky? Like at work, where you might get in trouble for disagreeing with your boss.
That's tough.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
Right.
It's about weighing the risks and the benefits.
Okay.
But even then, you can still resist herd mentality internally
What do you mean?
by staying true to yourself, to your values,
Okay.
by not compromising your integrity, even if you can't say it out loud.
Right.
Maybe find ways to influence things subtly by asking thoughtful questions or presenting other data.
Yeah.
It might not always change the outcome,
Sure.
but it keeps you aligned with your own moral compass.
So even when we can't change the direction of the herd, we can choose how we react to it on the inside.
Exactly.
We can stick to our own sense of what's right, even when surrounded by different opinions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And sometimes that internal resistance, that's what plants the seed for bigger change.
Okay.
It might inspire others to do the same,
Uh-huh.
to start questioning things, to start thinking for themselves.
I like that. And that's where the power of minority influence comes in.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on. Minority influence. I thought we were talking about resisting the herd.
We are.
Okay.
But think of it this way, even a small group of people,
Yeah.
if they're consistent and really believe in what they're saying,
Uh-huh.
they can actually change the majority's mind.
Really?
There's research that shows it takes as little as 5% of a group
5%.
to influence the other 95%.
Wow. So it's not just about avoiding the negative influence of the herd.
Yeah.
It's also about maybe being part of a group that changes the herd for the better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about all the social movements throughout history.
Okay.
The suffragettes, the civil rights movement, the fight for LGBTQ plus equality.
Right.
They all started with small groups of people who refused to conform, who stood up for what they believed in, even when it was unpopular or even dangerous.
So it's not just about protecting ourselves.
Right.
It's also about having the courage to challenge the status quo,
Exactly.
to stand up for what's right, even when it feels like you're swimming upstream.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those little acts of courage,
Yeah.
they can have a ripple effect,
Okay.
inspiring others to do the same.
I like it.
That's how real change happens.
Not by just blindly following along,
Right.
but by people who are willing to be different.
That's inspiring, but it also feels kind of daunting.
It does.
Yes.
It does. Where do we even start? How do we become that courageous, that willing to go against the grain?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's something we'll explore more in our next segment.
Okay, good.
We'll talk about some practical strategies for building up that inner strength, for finding your voice, for making choices that are true to you,
Right.
even when the herd's trying to pull you in another direction.
So we've been talking about this idea of minority influence and how small groups can spark real change.
But let's face it, going against the crowd, being that dissenting voice, it takes a lot of guts.
It really does. It's not easy to, challenge the status quo.
Right.
Especially when you risk being, left out or made fun of.
Yeah, for sure. Our brains are wired to want acceptance.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what we talked about.
Exactly. Going against the grain can trigger that primal fear of being rejected.
So how do we get over that fear? How do we build up the courage to stand by what we believe in, even when it feels like everyone else is against us?
It starts with recognizing that courage isn't the absence of fear.
Okay.
It's about acting despite the fear. It's about putting your values first.
Right.
Even when you're scared of what others might think.
So it's not about becoming fearless. It's more about learning to manage that fear.
Yeah.
To turn it into something positive.
Exactly. And that takes practice.
Okay.
It's like building a muscle.
Okay.
The more you use your courage muscle, the stronger it gets.
So how do we exercise that muscle?
Start small. Okay.
Maybe share a different opinion with your friends? Or support a cause that's not popular with your social group?
Okay. I like that. Starting small, building up that confidence. But what about situations where the stakes are higher? Like, say you see something wrong happening at work.
Yeah.
It's not just about expressing a different opinion, then it's about potentially risking your job.
Those are definitely tougher situations.
Yeah.
And it's important to really think about the risks.
Right.
But even then, there are ways to be courageous.
Okay, like what?
Maybe document what's happening.
Okay.
Talk to a trusted mentor, or find allies at work who feel the same way you do.
So it's about making your voice heard,
Yeah.
even if it's not in a big confrontational way. It's about being strategic, working within the system to make a change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Courage doesn't always have to be loud or, dramatic. Sometimes the most courageous acts are quiet and subtle.
Yeah. That reminds me of those stories about people who resisted during wars, hiding refugees or speaking out against propaganda.
Right.
They might not have been on the front lines,
Yeah.
but their actions were still incredibly brave and important.
Absolutely. And those acts of courage, big or small, they create a ripple effect, leading to positive change.
Yeah.
Think about Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus.
Right.
That one act of defiance sparked a whole movement.
Yeah, that changed a nation. It's amazing to think that one person's courage can do that.
It is.
To change the course of history. But how do we know when to act? How do we know when to stand up to the herd and when it's better to stay quiet?
That's something each person has to figure out for themselves.
Okay.
It depends on your values, your risk tolerance, and the situation itself.
Right.
But here's a good rule of thumb. If you're feeling conflicted, like something's not right,
Yeah.
that's usually a sign that something's off.
It's like that gut feeling we talked about before.
Exactly.
That inner voice telling us something's wrong, even when everyone else seems okay with it.
Listen to that voice.
Okay.
It's usually trying to tell you something. And if you feel like you need to do something, even if it's scary or makes you uncomfortable,
Right.
that's usually a sign you're on the right path.
So it's not about blindly following rules or trying to get approval from others.
Nope.
It's about trusting ourselves, our own sense of right and wrong.
Exactly. And that's what real courage is all about.
I love that. It's about making choices that align with our values, even when everyone else is doing something different.
That's it. We've covered a lot of ground today, from how our brains work to the power of a few people to make a difference.
We have.
I hope you're walking away with a better understanding of how herd mentality shapes our world.
I am, for sure.
And more importantly, how we can use that knowledge to make better, more courageous choices.
And remember, this is just the beginning. This journey of self-discovery and conscious choice-making.
It doesn't end here.
Keep questioning, keep exploring.
And keep embracing what makes you unique.
Because in a world that often values fitting in,
your perspective, your courage to be different, that's a gift.
It is. Don't be afraid to share it.
Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.